Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Carroll Connection. I'm your host, Jared Carroll. Here to bring you guys another great episode. I did want to take a chance to shout out last week's episode 101 with Mark Furtado. He is the brand owner of The Artisan, a locally based clothing brand that their iconic logo right now is currently the whale's tail. And I love that because it's coming out of New Bedford and it just kind of makes sense with their history. Really great stuff. He donates a lot of his proceeds to Save the Oceans as well as a bunch of other great causes. So please support him. You can check that episode out, thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the major listening platforms. So that brings me to today's episode 102. I had a guest scheduled for today. Unfortunately, they did cancel. And unfortunately for them, this is the second time that has happened. And I've had to create this rule for myself to avoid situations like this. But after 2 cancellations, you're no longer invited on this podcast. I have to put some boundaries down for myself because when you cancel last minute, I understand once things happen. I've had people, cancel before, and I totally get that. Shit happens. But twice, I'm sorry, this ain't baseball. There ain't no 3-strike rule. Like after 2 times, you're not only disrespecting me, you're disrespecting my platform, and you're just completely wasting my time. I don't have time for foolishness. I don't have time for bullshit. I get shit happens, but I schedule these 3 weeks in advance, and if you cannot communicate yourself articulate yourself enough to give me a heads up to let me know what things are going to happen, I have no respect for that. It's unprofessional. It's just downright pathetic. We're grown. There's no need for time wasting. Like I say, I wish them nothing but the best. I hope their situation works out for the best, but I got to keep moving on. I have plenty of other people that want to come on the podcast that I would gladly have scheduled for it today, but unfortunately, I had someone that decided to waste my time. It's unfortunate. It is what it is. It comes with podcasting. But that brings us to this episode, which I'm titling Art of Communication. Kind of fitting. I wasn't going to record today because you guys know that I'm not a fan of solo episodes. More, especially when I just did one for my 100th episode about a week, 2 weeks ago. So I don't like to throw out a bunch of solos back to back to back like that. It's just repetitive, and I try not to do that because my podcast is built upon the interviews that we do, or I do specifically, and talking to my guests and making it about them. But I like to try to sprinkle in a little bit of solos to kind of get you to see me, since I am the host, to try to get myself out there a little bit. So when I was thinking about a title for this episode, communication came up perfectly because it was completely lacking in the situation that I mentioned prior. And I've noticed in these times, like as social media has come to play, the art of communication is completely missing from today's society. People don't know how to communicate. Everything is through text or social media. The face-to-face conversations are quite frankly dead. And it's sad that we are living through these times where people throw out logic and reason and completely just go with the emotional response and misread tones and text, and it creates so much drama and fights that are not necessarily even there. We don't know how to communicate. It's like we're stuck in like this toddler teenage phase where we just don't know how to communicate our wants and our needs. And it's hard to get to this place to communicate yourself, obviously, when you don't have to, with social media being so present and dominant force in society. What's the need for all these face-to-face conversations? Like being an introvert is like completely normal. But you need to be able to articulate yourself and vocalize for yourself, because if you can't speak for yourself, no one else is going to do it for you. You have to be your own voice. And it's not easy to find your own voice. I went most of my life without having a voice to articulate where I was coming from, who I was, what I wanted. I had to learn that. Therapy, podcasting, reading books. I had to figure this shit out myself. It's not easy, but you have to learn how to communicate. You have to be your biggest advocate, because if you're not advocating for yourself, no one's going to do it for you. It's just the facts. Podcasting has allowed me to learn how to communicate with people, and I've said it throughout the podcast when I'm interviewing people. I think Joe Rogan talked about this before. When you're talking to people, the way you say things and how you're saying them in the context in which you're bringing to the conversation matter. People always revert to tone is everything. But one of my favorite podcasts always talks about whether is like if I said the sky is blue or the sky is fucking blue, it doesn't matter. The sky is blue. It doesn't matter how I say it. The truth is the truth. And we go off science, mathematics, statistics. We have all these measures to confirm this in our current reality, obviously without getting super in-depth into spirituality and all these other things. But when you're communicating things, sometimes the tone doesn't necessarily matter. You're just speaking what you need to speak, and obviously just say what you got to say. And that brings me to kind of where I've been with this particular situation where I've had cancellations and people will drag it out, and I'm just like, don't waste my time or don't waste my weekend or whatever I'm trying to do with your schedule when I agreed to this prior. So, and I get it. Shit happens, like I always say. And that's why I'm doing this podcast. This has kind of always been like my release to kind of just express myself, to kind of get what's on my mind out there and do it in a vulnerable kind of session to kind of look back on and reflect. It's not easy to kind of release some of that frustration because obviously I put a ton of time into this and was already set up, and I was kind of waiting around all day for a message to confirm whether we would record yesterday or today, and neither of that came. So on the receiving end, when someone's not communicating to you, these are feelings that you're going to feel: frustration, anger, maybe some sadness, even some anxiety waiting for that response. And these are all normal emotions that people feel when they're getting some bad news. Maybe they're about to be ghosted, maybe they're about to be broken up with, maybe they're about to be let go from their job. Whatever it is, we feel these feelings and we need to process them properly. And I'm doing that actively with you guys through this podcast, is talking my way through my emotions and how I'm pretty upset about what happened, but I'm still going to record a podcast and then make content out of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, make the positive out of the negative and express myself in a way that's beneficial for me. I'm getting content out there. I'm also letting a standard be known that I'm taking this very seriously. I take my podcast very seriously, so I don't want to deal with any of that nonsense. And it goes to what I'm saying. You have to articulate and you have to vocalize or advocate for yourself. And I will say it throughout this podcast: if you don't advocate for yourself, no one will. You have to learn how to speak. You have to learn how to speak properly. Read more books, write, journal. I know I haven't talked about journaling in so long in this podcast, but like, it's another great example of how to improve your communication skills. Writing your thoughts out. Because when you actually read it back, it might sound a little jumbled up there. And this is why meditation comes in, because it helps you kind of filter all that bullshit that's in your head. It's tools. They're all tools. Like I said, even social media is a tool for communication. I've said this it's like the beginning of the podcast. Social media is a tool for communication. It is not the only avenue of communication. We are human beings. We are social creatures. We need face-to-face contact. We read social cues. We read facial expressions, tone. Excuse me, goddamn. I'm getting very animated and I don't have my water next to me. But I do this obviously all live. So, but man, frustrating. Because some of the things that I've learned how to do, I know other people haven't put in that work to do. So like it's like you understand because you've been there. So like you're not so mad at the person because they're just living their life and they don't understand. Like if this was fucking Joe Rogan or the Oprah Winfrey show, you know damn well they're not going to cancel and they're not going to flake on it. But because it's the Carroll connection, maybe it's not so popular to them. Maybe they don't care about it so much. They cancel. It's normal. It happens. I've had plenty of cancellations and I've had weeks that I've canceled too. So it's learning to not take it so personal and making it into something else. Content. Like I always say, like, I don't really care who listens to my podcast, but I want to continually keep pushing content. And like, I felt like I had to today. And shout out to Wally and the Ever Changing Vibe, because I was scrolling social media and I saw that he posted a podcast today and it looked like a solo because it said just with Wally. And I was like, man, if he's doing it, there's no excuse for me not to post one. Like I just did one recently, but I want to keep pushing content. Like this is something that I enjoy doing. This is my release. And it felt like when I knew it wasn't going to happen the other day, I wasn't going to be recording. I was like, damn, I wish I was doing my podcast. And I had all the equipment set up and I was like, you can do your podcast. Who's stopping you? No one's stopping you. So set up the microphone, rearrange some stuff, put the camera up, hit record. And this is what you guys are getting. So it's kind of an unfiltered, real time, real emotions, how I'm feeling about this scenario. And I'm kind of just like walking through these emotions. And another thing that I've learned about communication is once you learn better skills in how to communicate yourself, your relationships improve. Like straight up, like I've noticed with work, with dating, with friends, with family, when you can kind of explain your emotions and explain what you're thinking and why you're thinking them or how you're feeling and why you're feeling that way, people will gain some type of respect for you because most people haven't grasped that. And obviously we go through life and we're supposed to mature and grow, but some just don't anymore. So when you come across people that are like-minded and can recognize that, it's like a breath of fresh air. And I've done that throughout this podcast, and I've hopefully allowed people a chance to come on and learn some of these skills and get in front of a camera, get in front of a microphone, and be like, this is kind of what podcasting is. This is what it's like to step your foot into the media sense, into social media a little bit further than what you already do. And I'm trying to provide some value and like create this outlet where we talk about mental health. And like, that's where I try to advocate for mental health awareness and different things that have helped my mental health and my guests' mental health, and having these conversations and just talking about different things and just life in general. Because when you're talking about yourself, whether you're talking about your story, your life, your family, your friends, your passions, it's all related to mental health. Having someone that will listen to you, just to listen, is everything sometimes, because a lot of people will listen just to respond and they're not actually listening. And obviously, there's a little bit of ego involved in all of that. We all subconsciously want people to listen to our story and listen to us talk, especially when you're kind of introverted like myself. It's nice to know that people actually care and want to listen. And that's why I love this podcast. And when I check the numbers, that I hit 10,000 downloads the other day, I was like, oh my God, this is crazy that people gave my podcast a chance. It's amazing. And like reflecting now that we're past episode 100 and we're looking towards the future, it's so crazy to continually create stuff and watch it kind of like change into different things and morph into this social media presence that I'm trying to create. is something that's really awesome. And when you find something that really kind of makes you happy and passionate and driven, you got to go after it. You can't just like, nah, I won't do it this week. Nah, I won't do it next week. I'll just keep pushing it off, pushing it off. I'll take a break here, take a break there. And breaks are good. Breaks are important. But you can't let yourself fall off the wagon. And I really just didn't want to let myself go off this momentum that I'm feeling right now. And like, I'm really excited with my podcast, the way that we're going, the direction that I'm heading, the conversations that I have lined up. I have really great guests coming up in the future weeks, which I'm super excited about. And hopefully a lot of new faces for these next 100 episodes, bringing back some old faces, having some more in-depth conversations about where they've been, what they're doing, and where they're going. And I've never been more excited to bring you guys content. And I'm looking forward towards maybe possibly creating a studio in the next couple of years, and we'll seeing what happens, like whether it's the Carroll connection or whether it is some type of media presence or getting into Twitch or something like that. It's definitely something that is on my mind, and it's definitely something that I want to continue pushing the envelope with. I think as I keep getting older and life keeps moving forward, I will have a better idea of where I'm going to apply this pressure and take this podcast, because I have the equipment, I have this mindset. I'm already thinking about getting new cameras and updating some stuff. So there's a lot of things to be excited about with the future of this podcast. And I didn't really hit too much about this in the thank you episode, so this is kind of like a backfiller of that. But there's a lot of great stuff coming up with those episodes in the future. But I want to start talking a little bit about this art of communication and wrapping things up with this episode, because I really don't want to go over 20 minutes. I wanted to make this a quick episode. I wanted to just kind of get behind the microphone, speak, and get out there. The art of communication is everything. You need to understand that as human beings, we need to know how to communicate with one another. And when you don't properly learn these skills, whether it's reading, just writing, maybe it's journaling, speaking at different events, whether it's presentations for school, or even if you get into a passion like social media, where it's YouTubing, vlogging, podcasting, Twitch streaming, you need to understand how to talk to people. You need to understand how to advocate for yourself. Because if you don't understand how to advocate for yourself, no one else is going to do that for you, because no one else knows what you want. Only you know what you want. So you have to be the one, as uncomfortable as it is, to stand up and speak for yourself. These are not easy skills to learn, and I'm not saying you're going to learn them overnight. I've done this podcast for over almost 2.5 years, and I'm still learning things. I'm still learning how to properly address what I'm feeling in the moment. I mean, if you listen to this episode, I was pretty angry leading into it. But as I've walked through it, and now that I've recorded this episode, or I'm currently recording this episode as you guys are listening, which is kind of real time, it's kind of dope, that it is what it is. It happened. What are you going to do from that? Did this podcast, made content out of it, talked about communication, the skills that were lacking in that situation, how I felt on that, where we're going, and what you can do about it. Because you got to realistically, you give yourself a little bit of time to feel it. Yeah, it sucks. Yeah, this hurts. You're going to get over it, though. And you have choices. We all have choices in this life. It's up to you whether you want to make a choice that's positive or negative. No one's going to do that for you. You have to do that for you. Be the advocate for your own life. I think that's the perfect way to start wrapping up this podcast. If you guys like these solo episodes, please let me know. I don't really have a gauge on these solo episodes, so I'm not too sure who listens to these, if they enjoy listening to these, what I should talk about. So if you made it through basically the 20 minutes of this podcast, please feel free to DM me, text me, and let me know what you think of this episode, or what I should talk about in solo episodes. And I'll put it in my notepad. I have like a whole thing of notes that I keep for this podcast. So when I do a solo episode, I'll look at that topic and I can bring it up and address it. Please, though, check out all my other episodes. I have so many amazing guests, and there's so many amazing stories that I think that need to be heard. And just find the one that relates to you. Look at the descriptions, and if someone's story specifically might relate to yours, check it out. And then like, rate, review, subscribe, share. All those things help me when promoting this podcast. You can check it out at thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. So, till next time, guys, peace.